Chapter 269. Among the crowd, the man in the green robe with wide sleeves was like a magnificent scene in spring, making the night seem gentler. He had never thought that he would meet Chu Zhao here. His face was gentle and elegant, and his expression was as gentle as ever. Compared to many years ago, he had become thinner. However, there seemed to be something missing between his eyebrows. He was like a pearl that had lost its brilliance, silent and peaceful. Ian walked 2 steps towards him. After standing still, he asked, "Fourth young master Chu, why are you here?" After the crown prince was punished and the 4th prince ascended the throne, there was no news of Chu Zhao. It was said that someone had seen him outside the city and guessed that he had left Shuajing. After Emperor Zhao Kong ascended the throne, he intended to clean up Su Jingfu's old subordinates. Naturally, the Chu family was one of the families that were suppressed. In these years, the Chu family had almost declined. Chu Linfeng had even dismissed his 19 concubines and relied on Madame Chu's family to survive. As for Chu Zhao, everyone gradually forgot about him. After all, Prime Minister Su seemed to be a name from a long, long time ago. The handsome and brave youths of the capital emerged year after year. In the dreams of the women of the Great Way, the 2 brothers of the Shao family had already married and had children. The 4th young master of the Chu family, who was like an orchid, was also like a beautiful dream in a wild valley. After appearing briefly, he disappeared into the river of time. However, he appeared again at this moment. In an instant, Yin felt as if he had returned to the Jiang of many years ago. Chu Zhao smiled and said, "I have always been in Jiang." Yin was silent. If he was in Jiang, it was understandable that no one in the world could find his whereabouts. However, perhaps it was not that the emperor could not be found. It was better for him to be here. Yin could not describe his feelings towards Chu Zhao. Although he was Su Jingfu's student, he had never really heard him back then. It was nothing more than different standpoints. Yin knew that Chu Zhao was quite a scheming person and was not as harmless as he appeared on the surface. But many years had passed, and the love and hatred had gradually faded. When they met again here, they could not be considered friends, nor could they be considered enemies. They were just an old acquaintance. She noticed that the beautiful and charming maidservant was no longer by Chu Zhao's side. She had already expected this. She paused for a moment before she asked, "Fourth young master Chu, what are you doing in Jiang now?" "I opened a calligraphy and painting shop here to make a living," Chu Zhao answered with a smile. "Ehe, why did you suddenly come to Jiang?" "Her Highness is getting married. My family and I are here to attend the ceremony." He did not hide anything. Mu Xiaolo's wedding was a big event in Jiang City. Everyone in Jiang City knew about it. "Is military governor Xiao here too?" he asked. Yin nodded. Chu Zhao smiled and looked at Yin. The woman in front of him still had a cheerful expression. He had met many people and many women later on, but she was the only one who had such a magnanimous and lively expression. His gaze fell on the sugar tiger in Yan's hand. He was stunned for a moment before he asked softly, "Does he have a child?" "Yes," Yan said. "He has a daughter. She's almost 4 years old now. Her name is Xiao Yao." "Xiao Yao. Isn't the name I gave her very nice?" Yan said proudly. "I don't have any requirements for her. As long as she's safe and healthy and lives a carefree life, I'll be satisfied." She did not have any talent in poetry and songs. However, everyone agreed that the name Xiao Yao was good. "White clouds cover the vast Jianghu, allowing me to travel freely." Chu Zhao looked at her and smiled. He is very good at naming things." "Thank you." Yin smiled and asked, "Fourth young master Chu, do you have a sweetheart now?" Back then, Chu Zhao had tricked her into coming out in the middle of the night and confessed to her in a very mushy way. In the end, Xiao Ju was furious, and she had to coax her for a long time. Now that things had changed, she had let go of many things. Although he was 4th young master Chu, he was only Chu Zhao now. 4th young master Chu would confess to her because of benefits and his position. Who would the real Chu Zhao have a sweetheart? He was so smart and talented. No matter what, there would be no shortage of people who would like him. Chu Zhao was stunned for a moment. He lowered his head and smiled. Not everyone is as lucky as Military Governor Xiao. Hien was about to speak when suddenly someone's voice sounded. What are you doing here? She turned around and saw Xiao Ju walking over from the night. Her face was cold and her gaze was like a knife. Military Governor Xiao. Chu Zhao was also surprised. He smiled and said, "Long time no see." Fourth concubine, who was standing in front of a cosmetic stall, was trembling in fear. Hien had gone to buy sweets and met a handsome young master after buying them. The two of them stood to the side and talked. This was nothing. Perhaps they had met an old acquaintance. However, fourth concubine could tell that something was wrong. Second young Mistress Zhao's expression was open and magnanimous. However, the handsome young master's gaze seemed to have feelings for second young Mistress Xiao. However, it was not the kind of infatuation. How should she describe it? It was as if he had once loved her deeply, but was abandoned. Fourth concubine had been with second concubine for a long time and believed that she had developed a good eye. She only hated that she did not have a plate of melon seeds. Otherwise, she could sit here and eat for a few hours. A handsome young master who was frustrated in love was generally lovable. Just as fourth concubine's imagination was running wild, wondering what kind of entanglement the two of them had in the past, and how second young Mistress Xiao had betrayed this handsome young man, she suddenly felt a shadow appear beside her. When she looked up, she was almost scared out of her wits. Military Governor Xiao had arrived at some point. He stood beside her and calmly looked at the two people in the distance. His eyes narrowed slightly. Fourth concubine swore that she saw Military Governor Zhao's fingers turn slightly white as they pressed against the sword at his waist. Many of the men in Jiang City who were jealous of each other would fight over the girl they loved. This was nothing. However, looking at that gentle and weak young master dressed in cyan, she was afraid that he would be beaten to death by Military Governor Xiao. And second young Mistress Xiao. She had heard that the people of the Central Plains placed great importance on women. She did not know if second young Mistress Xiao would be able to bear the crime of having an affair. Fourth concubine wanted to remind him, but she was afraid of the pressure from the person beside her. In the end, she took 2 steps back. However, when second young Mistress Xiao said something in front of him, the young master dressed in cyan looked even more dejected. Immediately after, Military Governor Xiao walked up to him. The moment Hien saw Xiao Ju appear, he cursed in his heart. He did not know why, but every time this person appeared in this kind of situation, it was especially coincidental. Back then, he had a grudge against Chu Zhao. After so many years, looking at his current expression, he was afraid that he would not be magnanimous. I was here to buy sweets, and coincidentally met fourth young Master Chu. We exchanged a few words. Hien explained tactfully, "We only exchanged a few words before you came." Xiao Ju only glanced at Chu Zhao before her gaze fell on Hien. She said, "Let's go." 2 words, each word was chilling. Hien said goodbye to Chu Zhao. Then, fourth young Master Chu will be leaving first. Chu Zhao smiled and nodded. He watched Hien and Xiao Ju leave until they could no longer be seen in the crowd. Only then did he withdraw his gaze. The water in Jiang was still clear. He thought that after so many years, his heart had long been like still water. However, the moment he saw her, he realized that he had never let go. However, this was all he could do. The sweets vendor was crowded with a lively crowd. The young master dressed in cyan walked in, lowered his eyes, and said softly, "Little brother, I want a flower basket." Xiao Ju walked very quickly. Hien followed behind her. He felt a headache coming on. He called out, "Wait, Xiao Ju, fourth concubine is still behind. She has already gone back." Hien, ? Fourth concubine was actually so disloyal. She just threw a firecracker in front of him. She even had to coax him herself. Hien caught up with Xiao Ju in a few steps. He didn't care whether he was willing or not, or what expression he had. He grabbed his arm and said, "Xiao Ju, why? Aren't you going to continue catching up with your fourth young Master Chu?" He said mockingly, "We're not catching up. We're just greeting each other." Hien thought that Xiao Ju and Chu Zhao probably had some ill-fated relationship in their previous lives. The moment they met Chu Zhao, he was especially excited. There were 3 precautions in life. fire, theft, and Chu Zhao. No matter how capable I am, I can't predict the future. Ian looked at him. I also didn't expect that he would be in Jiang City now. Do you think the Emperor knows about this? Xiao Ju sneered. He knew about it a long time ago. Although he had already vaguely guessed it, he still sighed when Xiao Ju said it out loud. Since Chu Zhao had entered Jiang City, he probably wouldn't be able to leave in the future. He would be imprisoned here for the rest of his life. However, for him, this might not be a bad ending. Xiao Ju sneered when she saw his expression. You're really worried about him. Here we go again. Ian felt helpless and could only say, Eldest brother, it's been so many years. Why are you still brooding? I miss you all the time. Look. She took the opportunity to put the sugar tiger in her hand next to his mouth. I spent a lot of money to buy this sugar figurine for you. I'll give it to you as an apology. Xiao Ju brushed her hand away. He was amused by her ability to lie without batting an eyelid. He said, You're not even willing to lie to people anymore. Who's lying to you? Do you want me to stand on the roof and shout? He and like military governors shout the most. We've seen pictures together. He giggled and said, You clearly know in your heart. Xiao Ju looked at her for a long time and finally admitted defeat. Forget it. Anyway, she always had 1,000 different ways to coax people, even if sometimes her coaxing wasn't very sincere. He warned, I'll let it go this time. If you meet him privately again, thought, she's talking as if I come to Jiang often. After this, who knows when I'll come here again. However, Xiao Ju glanced at the sugar figurine in her hand. I don't accept this apology. Then how do you want to apologize? Ian raised his eyebrows and stared at her without saying a word. Ian was speechless. She gritted her teeth and said, Xiao Ju, you're just coveting my beauty and my body. Xiao Ju hummed and replied smoothly, That's right. Ian was speechless. That night was another muddle-headed night. The next morning, Xiao Yao woke up. The sugar tiger had already melted into a puddle of sugar water. Ian held a bare bamboo stick and said seriously in front of Xiao Yao, Old tiger, do you see this? This is a tiger. Xiao Yao looked at him with a confused expression. Xiao Ju walked in from outside and saw that she was teasing Xiao Yao again. He was speechless for a moment before he walked over and picked Xiao Yao up. He said, It's time to eat. The Chui family's breakfast was sumptuous as usual. After breakfast, Chui Yuezhi had to go to the imperial palace to help. The customs of Jiang City were different from those of the Central Plains. Xiao Ju took care of the younger ones and did not forget to push Yan's favorite dishes in front of him. Fourth concubine, who was passing by, saw this and was stunned for a moment. After breakfast, she secretly pulled Yan to the side and hesitated for a moment before she whispered, Second young mistress Xiao, can you teach me a thing or two about your husband controlling technique? Ian almost thought that he had misheard her. She asked, What technique did you say? The technique of controlling a husband. Fourth concubine said somewhat embarrassedly, Last night, it wasn't that I wanted to leave first. It was just that Governor Xiao was already here, and I didn't want to disturb him. I definitely didn't abandon you on purpose. However, at that time, Military Governor Xiao didn't look too happy. This morning, he seemed to be the same as before. I just wanted to ask, how did you do it? How'd she do it? You would have to ask her waist. Ian laughed awkwardly. Actually, I don't have any husband-controlling technique. How is that possible? Fourth concubine was anxious. I still remember what you said to Miss Ling and the others in the residence that year. After so many years, second young mistress's husband-controlling technique must have improved a lot. If you teach me a thing or two, I guarantee that I won't teach it to outsiders. You won't teach it to outsiders? Do you really think it's a secret manual? He never thought that the nonsense he made up in the Chui residence that year would be used as a classic by others. However, when he met fourth concubine's thirsty gaze, Ian did not want to disappoint her. He began to talk. The husband-controlling technique seems to be controlling, but it's actually letting go. You have a balance between tension and relaxation. You're neither close nor distant. Sometimes you're as cold as ice, and sometimes you're as passionate as a woman. Ahem, perhaps you'll be able to control it, and practice makes perfect. Have a balance between tension and relaxation. Fourth concubine murmured. He Yin patted her shoulder. Take your time to think about it. I'll leave first. She ran off as if she was escaping, leaving fourth concubine standing there alone and carefully feeling it. When they returned to the room, Lin Shuanghe was standing at the door. When he saw He Yin, he urged, Younger sister He, where did you run off to? We have to go to the prince's residence immediately. The wedding hasn't started yet, so let's go see Her Highness the Princess first. He Yin hurriedly agreed. After quickly packing up, they took the carriage and followed Cui Yuezhi to the prince's residence. Perhaps it was because of Mu Xiaolu's wedding, but the prince's residence now looked much livelier than before. There were lanterns and colored banners everywhere, and there were cut-sheet characters pasted everywhere. Thus, the originally empty and desolate prince's residence became luxurious and grand. As soon as they entered, a maidservant greeted them with a smile. Lord Cui, Military Governor Xiao, Lord He, Young Master Lin, Her Highness is already waiting for you. He Yin and the others followed the maidservant inside. When they reached the main hall, they heard a laughing voice. You're here. He Yin raised his eyes to look. Mu Hongjin walked out from the back of the hall. She was wearing the ceremonial robes of the Jiang royal family. Today was Mu Xiaolu's wedding, so she naturally wore red. However, this red was different from the warm red of the past. It was a bit darker, which made her face not as dignified and cold as before, but more gentle. The woman's long hair was tied up in a bun behind her head. She didn't wear a crown. She was no longer the princess, so she only wore a dark red velvet flower. Her eyes were still beautiful, but if one looked closely, there were still white spots in her bun. She was older and gentler. When she looked at them, it was as if she was looking at an old friend who had been separated for a long time. There was a hint of joy in her eyes. Your Highness. He Yin and the others bowed to her. This place hasn't been so lively for a long time. I'm very happy that you can come to Xiao Lu's wedding, she said. Lin Shuanghe smiled and said, It's been a long time since we last met. Your Highness is still as beautiful as before. His ability to make women happy had improved a lot over the years. Mu Hongjin let out a puff and then shook her head. Stroking the hair on one side of her temple, she sighed and said, I'm getting old. What kind of heavenly beauty is this? Her gaze was attracted by Xiao Yao in Xiao Ju's arms. She softly said, This is Governor Zhao's daughter? How old is she this year? He Yin said, Her name is Xiao Yao. She's almost 3 years old. Mu Hongjin reached out to Xiao Yao. Xiao Yao hesitated for a while before reaching out her chubby arms, indicating that she could hug her. Mu Hongjin held her in her arms. Xiao Yao seemed to be very close to her. She giggled and shouted, Auntie! Then she kissed Mu Hongjin's face. He Yin thought that if Lu Buang and Mu Hongjin didn't have a strange combination of factors, he might have called Mu Hongjin Grandmaster. However, he called her Annie, which was too different in terms of seniority. However, Mu Hongjin didn't care about Xiao Yao calling her that. Instead, she seemed very happy. She took off a gemstone ring from her finger and stuffed it into Xiao Yao's hand. She said, Since you call me Annie, I should give Yao Yao a gift. Do you like this? Xiao Yao's eyes lit up. She nodded desperately and said in a crisp voice, I like it. He Yin couldn't bear to look at her. Xiao Yao was considered the pearl in the Xiao family's palm. They usually gave her a lot of food and drinks. How could she be such a money grubber? It was embarrassing. Mu Hongjin held Xiao Yao in her arms and was talking to them. Not long after, another guard came and said, Your Highness, the people of the Qin family are coming. He Yin found this guard familiar and couldn't help but take a few more glances. Cui Yuezhi said with a smile, Second young mistress Xiao, do you still know Mu Yi? Mu Yi? He Yin recalled that during the Battle of Jiang, she had fought side by side with a soldier from Jiang City called Mu Yi. Before she left, the young man had given her a wooden painting. She had kept the wooden painting well even now. However, the Mu Yi in front of her was very different from the Mu Yi of that year. His immaturity and childishness had all faded away. He now looked like a mature man. However, after Mu Yi saw He Yin, his maturity and steadiness quickly dissipated. He became hesitant and excited, as if he wanted to look but didn't dare to. He was inexplicably a little shy. Shui Yueji said, Mu Yi is now the personal guard commander of His Highness in the mansion. He is no longer the young boy of that year. Mu Yi, do you still remember second young Mistress Xiao, Missy of that year? Mu Yi scratched his head and whispered, I remember. Xiao Ju coldly looked at the two of them. Lin Shuanghe coughed a few times and quickly changed the topic. He didn't want the young guard commander to bump into his second young master, Zhao's reverse scale. He only pretended to be curious and asked, What about His Highness? We've been here for so long, but we haven't seen His Highness. Back then, His Highness didn't even reach my chest. I wonder how much taller he has grown. Mu Hongjin smiled and said, Go and take a look. Why isn't Xiao Lu here yet? As they were talking, a woman's voice came from behind the hall. Grandmother, what's the hurry? Aren't I here now? The woman who walked out from behind was dressed in a wedding dress that was as red as fire. The dress was made by the best embroiderers in Jiang City and was decorated with fine tassels and bells. When she walked, the jingling sounds could be heard. The hem of the dress was extremely long and looked like a blooming flower. Compared to the wedding dress, the woman's face was even more gorgeous. The golden crown accentuated her fair and small face. She was born very similar to Mu Hongjin. The corners of her eyes were painted red, exquisite and eye-catching. However, compared to Mu Hongjin, she was more willful and lively. At first glance, it was obvious that she was a wild girl who grew up in Jiang City. When she saw He Yin and the others, a trace of joy flitted across her eyes. However, she still had to put on an arrogant attitude and pretended to be indifferent as she said, You've come. It's been many years since we last met. His Highness has grown into a big girl. Lin Shuanghe looked at her and felt gratified as a father. However, he soon sighed and said, I didn't expect that even though His Highness has gotten married, I'm still alone. Mu Hongjin smiled and said, If Sir Lin feels lonely, why don't you stay in Jiang City for a while? There are many good girls in the city. Perhaps you'll be fated to meet Sir Lin. Things like fate can be forced. Lin Shuanghe opened his fan and said, Moreover, my ambition doesn't lie here. If I meet him, I'll be lucky. If not, I'll be fated to meet him. The heavens have their own plans. There's no need to rush. Mu Hongjin said, Sir Lin is open-minded. There wasn't much time to reminisce. The Jiang royal family's wedding ceremony was complicated, and the Qin family's people were about to arrive. Mu Hongjin and Mu Xiaolu went to the stage outside. He Yin and the others followed the servants' arrangements to rest first. At night, when the sky darkened, the lanterns in the palace lit up one by one. Near the originally empty ceremonial stage, the long steps were covered in red silk. The light of the lanterns illuminated the stage magnificently and solemnly. Around them were ceremonial officials. A couple supported each other and walked up the stage. Ian saw eldest Sir Qin. He was a young man with thick eyebrows and big eyes. Even though he was wearing a wedding robe, he still looked quite valiant. However, he would also carefully help Mu Xiaolu tidy up her overly long skirt. His gaze towards Mu Xiaolu was full of sincere love. From now on, there was another pair of lovers in the world. They would become the guardians of Jiang City, protecting the land and the people of this place. Ian couldn't help but look at Mu Hongjin, who was below the stage. The woman with deep eyebrows smiled as she looked at the young man and woman on the stage. The corners of her mouth were clearly smiling, but there were tears in her eyes. Perhaps, when she put on this wedding robe, she was filled with helplessness and anger towards fate. But now, Mu Xiaolu had walked up the stage. At least at this moment, Mu Xiaolu was happy. She truly loved the man in front of her. Being able to witness the birth of happiness with her own eyes was also a happy thing. Her regrets and unwillingness in the past seemed to have been fulfilled through Mu Xiaolu in front of her. Ian quietly tightened his grip on Xiao Ju's hand. Xiao Ju raised her eyes, and the corners of her lips lifted slightly. Lin Shuanghe loved crowds. He was even happier to see others get married than see himself get married. Following the completion of the ceremony, he happily went around looking for people to drink. However, his alcohol tolerance wasn't very good. After drinking a few cups, he got drunk and complained that the heavens were unfair. He was born so handsome, yet he was still alone. It was very hateful. Yin was speechless when he heard this. He waited until Lin Shuanghe was dead drunk and in a complete mess. When he was about to crawl under the table to find someone, he called for the servants of the Chui estate to help carry him to the carriage and send him back to the Chui estate. Yin also drank a few cups with the people he knew. Her alcohol tolerance, now, was finally better than when she was in the Liang Province Guards. Although it couldn't compare to when she was General Fei Hong in her previous life, it wasn't to the point where she would recite a book after drinking a cup. However, Yin didn't dare to drink too much because Xiao Yao was there. On the other hand, Xiao Ju's expression didn't change at all even after being toasted repeatedly. She really could not get drunk even after 1,000 cups. Xiao Yao was still young. When it was time, she would nod her head like a chicken pecking at rice. Yin looked outside. It was already late at night. He explained the situation to Mu Hongjin and took Xiao Yao back. Mu Hongjin liked Xiao Yao very much. She gently patted Xiao Yao's head and said, "Let's go back." Yin thought for a while and finally smiled. "Young Highness and young Master Qin are now married. Your Highness, please take care of yourself." Mu Hongjin also drank a lot. Her face was a little tipsy. She couldn't help but laugh. Okay. After they left, Mu Hongjin held a cup of wine and walked to the window in the hall. Outside the window, the willow trees swayed slightly with the wind. It was as if she had returned to the spring days of many years ago. It was as if a white-clothed youth was walking towards her, step by step. The sound of the zither was clear and melodious, and the sword was elegant and unrestrained. It was as if it was yesterday. In the bustling hall, the noisy music seemed to gradually fade away. This should be a rare, beautiful dream. Mu Hongjin found a comfortable position and leaned her head against the cloth pillow on the soft couch. She slowly closed her eyes. Her white wrist was exposed under her wide sleeves. She wore a coarse silver bracelet. The edges of the bracelet were engraved with small wild daisies. Layer upon layer, it was bright and beautiful. A maidservant tiptoed closer. She saw that the woman had closed her eyes and was pretending to be asleep. She smiled as if she was having a beautiful dream. The maidservant shushed her and warned her servants, "Her Highness is sleeping. Don't disturb her." She gently covered her with a thin blanket and tiptoed away. Outside, Yin and Xiao Ju walked towards the carriage. Jiang City didn't seem to have autumn or winter. It was always as long as summer. Yin and Xiao Ju walked side by side. Xiao Yao was lying on Xiao Ju's shoulder. Her breathing was steady, and she was sleeping soundly. She seemed to be able to faintly hear the sound of singing and laughter coming from the prince's residence. She lowered her head. Her heart was at peace like never before. Things that she once thought were luxurious and unattainable were now by her side. She didn't ask for much. She just wanted to be ordinary. In this life, she was free and unfettered. Since ancient times, everything flowed like water. Nothing could compare to this moment in front of her. She was free and unfettered. Xiao Yao smacked her lips in her sleep. Perhaps she dreamed of something delicious. Yin looked at her for a moment and asked with a smile, "Xiao Ju, do you want to eat candied haws?" Over. Chapter 270. Xiao Ju always thought that Yin was a liar. In other people's eyes, Yin was righteous, forthright, confident, and generous. But in his eyes, Yin was a person who could eat, sleep, talk nonsense, and was also a person who was greedy and stingy. Everyone had their own secrets. Although people lived in this world, they were not completely divided into good and evil. People's hearts were complicated and contradictory. But Yin was probably the most contradictory woman he had ever met in his life. She was a pitiful person who hid in the darkness and didn't want others to discover her true heart. Compared to the brave and confident female general on the battlefield, she was just too different. It was to the extent that in the past few years, no one had ever connected Yin with He Ru Fei. For example, the Fuyue army soldiers on the training field always said that their leader, General Guiyu, was more broad-minded than men, and that her conduct was more free and easy than men. She never looked back, and always strode forward. With her, the morale of the army was stable. Even if the sky fell, it would be the same thing. But Xiao Ju knew that He Yin was not a person who never looked back. For the past, she had a longer attachment and affection than other people, especially those good and precious memories. She carefully kept them and never neglected them. In Jinling City, Huayu Xian would often ask people to send some newly brewed sweet wine to her. Every time she tasted it, she would carefully write a reply. After drinking it, she would carefully keep the wine jar away. Every season, the women in the Rendezvous would send her clothes and boots that they sewed themselves. The embroidery was exquisite, and the tailoring was perfect. He and herself had not bought any new clothes for a long time. Lin Xuanghe sometimes saw it. He secretly whispered to Xiao Ju, "Huaijin, if my sister he continues to be like this, will she become the next Chu Linfeng?" Xiao Ju gave him a get lost. In Jiang City, Cui Yuezhi would occasionally write her a letter. He would tell her about the good things that happened recently, and also about Jiuchuan. She carefully read the letters and kept them away. In a wooden drawer in the study room, the letters were neatly stacked together. She didn't want to burn them. She seemed to be free and easy, but she was especially afraid of loss. Ian was very sad when Ermao died. Birth, old age, illness, and death were the norm in the world. Whether it was humans or animals, they would all die one day. Ian didn't like to cry. She didn't cry when Ermao died, but Xiao Ju often found her sitting on the doorstep of the courtyard, staring blankly at the bowl that Ermao used to drink from. He walked over and sat with her for a while without saying anything. Ian was not as cool about loss as he appeared to be. Back then, after the Battle of Yuchuo, her comrades had died. Before that, she had forced herself not to think about those things. After returning to Shuajing, she had been sad for a long time. The only thing he could do was to stay by Hian's side. At the very least, his name would never appear on the list of lost. In these 2 years, gradually, there were many madams who secretly talked to Bai Rongwei, asking if Xiao Ju had any plans to take in a concubine. Xiao family's 2 brothers were very outstanding. Xiao Jing had been married to Bai Rongwei for so many years, and even after having a daughter, Xiao Peipei, he was still deeply in love with Bai Rongwei. He really couldn't find the time. Xiao Ju was different. In the past, people thought that he had a good appearance, but in reality, his personality was too cold and emotionless. They thought that he would never marry in this lifetime. However, later on, he had married a military officer's daughter, and he doted on his wife very much. Once a cold-hearted person was enlightened and fell in love, he was far more attractive than a gentle and affectionate person. The thing that ordinary people liked to think the most was, if she can do it, why can't I? Moreover, Hian had not yet given birth to a child of the Xiao family, and he was also a military officer. He definitely didn't know how to capture a man's heart like those cute and spoiled girls. Therefore, many people thought that they had a chance. Bai Rongwei rejected one after another on behalf of Xiao Ju. She couldn't stand some people who were extremely bold, overconfident, and blinded by beauty. They used all kinds of methods. Xiao Ju threw people out of the door a few times. One time, he was so angry that he almost caused trouble for the other party's family. Fortunately, he was stopped by Hian. Hian smiled and said, "Everyone loves beauty. I'm not angry, so what are you angry about?" It would have been better if he didn't say this. As soon as he said this, Xiao Ju became even angrier. When Lin Xuanghe came to visit, he would always say, "Who would have thought that our Xiao family's second son, young Master Huaijin, will be controlled by my little sister He? You have to know," he sighed, "in the matters between men and women, the one who haggles the most loses. I originally thought that you had the upper hand. How come after a few years, you've been trampled on?" Xiao Ju didn't like Lin Xuanghe's theory of haggling over every ounce. People's emotions were not like war. They had to use military tactics to attack the heart. However, he had to admit that Lin Xuanghe was right. The soldiers in the Fuyue army always thought that Hian was accommodating him and saying sweet words to him. However, in reality, he was always easily provoked by Hian, no matter if it was a big or small matter. Perhaps, using Lin Xuanghe's theory, He liked Yin more than Yin liked him. However, this was nothing. In this world, it wasn't easy to have someone like you. There were millions of people in this world. Perhaps they were fated to be together, or perhaps they weren't. People were like grains of sand in a river. They met and parted in the blink of an eye. To be able to meet the person you liked in this vast and boundless world was already considered lucky. Therefore, there was no need to pursue the matter of who liked who more. However, Hien liked to ask him about this matter. She would often interrogate him at night. Military Governor Xiao, you actually had feelings for me in your previous life, right? If I were a man, you would definitely be a homosexual. Xiao Ju scoffed. I'm not a homosexual. Huh, this person didn't believe her at all. The last time I went to the martial arts practice field, I heard Shun Jiaodo and Liang Jiaodo talking. They said that when I was in the Liangzhou Guard, before my identity as a woman was exposed, I already thought that you and I were in that kind of relationship. She looked at Xiao Ju from head to toe, stroked her chin, and said, but with your looks, even if you're gay, you should be the kind that's very popular among gay men. At times like this, Xiao Ju was too lazy to argue with her. Once the curtain was pulled, the battle would be revealed. It was late at night. She slept soundly. Xiao Ju covered her with a blanket and rested her head on her hands. The starlight shone in from the window, illuminating a corner of the room with a faint light. He looked at the corner of the curtain. His heart was exceptionally calm. Xiao Ju didn't quite understand when he had feelings for Hien. Hien always muttered about how he had treated her differently in his previous life when he was studying at the Xianchang school. But now that he thought about it, the care he had given to Hien at that time was probably because he saw a lot of his own shadow in this youth. The only difference was that she had a bit more naivety than him. She still had to stubbornly persist in the muddy world. A youth who wore a mask was different from other youths. Because he insisted on keeping his secret from others, he was always alone. She was clumsy, but hard-working. She was silent, but optimistic. She was weak, but she had a heart of compassion for the weak. When he was young, Xiao Ju would occasionally be curious about what kind of face was under the tightly covered mask. When he was taking a nap on the tree, basking in the sun behind the rockery, and drinking tea in the bamboo forest of the Xianchang school, he would always see all kinds of He Ru Fei. She looked so inconspicuous, so small, but her whole body was shining. Others couldn't notice it, but he did. Xiao Ju had never doubted that He Ru Fei would be successful in the future, if she continued to be like this. But at that time, he was only attracted to her. He didn't like her. It was like seeing a star in the night. This star wasn't very bright, but it kept shining. Once it was seen, it was hard to ignore. Their relationship as classmates wasn't fake. So after Yu Hua Temple, he would even help He Ru Fei's sister. The first time was an accident, the second time was a coincidence, the third time was fate, and the fourth time was probably destined. Xiao Ju had never doubted that he and Hien were destined. Otherwise, why would God let her appear in front of him again and again? And his gaze was destined to be attracted by this person. Hien seemed to have never changed. The youth who pulled the bow and practiced archery under the night sky, trying to keep up with the team's pace, was no different from the boy who secretly studied in the Xianchang school. But after she took off her mask, she finally revealed her true self. She was confident and neat. She galloped in a martial arts arena to her heart's content. She was passionate and pure like a ray of light. But she was also careful. She was used to giving and was not satisfied with being favored. She was always at a loss when it came to more intimate relationships. At first, he only thought that this person was a skilled liar. Later on, his gaze unknowingly lingered on her body more and more. His emotions were affected by her, and for the first time in his life, he tasted the taste of jealousy. He would be happy, he would be angry, he would feel injustice for her, and he would want to heal all the pain she had experienced. He had made him feel that in this world, there were still many things worth looking forward to. For example, Lin Shuanghe always said, "Did you know that you would have a day like this?" He didn't know that he would have a day like this. It turned out that in this world, other than bearing responsibility, misunderstanding, betrayal, and killing, there were also moments of satisfaction. What he didn't know before, Hien brought him to know one by one. The person in front of him turned over and rolled into his arms. She subconsciously hugged him with both hands. He was slightly stunned. After pausing for a moment, a smile appeared on his lips. What did it matter who liked the other more? He was even more grateful to the heavens for giving him this bit of warmth in his cruel life. It allowed him to meet his true love and be with her forever. He liked the martial arts arena very much. After the Battle of Udo, Dewey's army rested. For at least 10 years, Udo wouldn't have the energy to make a comeback. However, they still had to train their soldiers. She was now the leader of the Fuyue army. When she trained the soldiers, she always reminded some of the Fuyue army's veterans of General Feihong. She was also agile and confident, but compared to the masked woman, she was more playful and friendly. There were also some recruits who refused to believe Yan's abilities. On the martial arts arena, the woman demonstrated the saber, horse, bow, and arrow. She was in high spirits and was as dazzling as a pearl. Yan was born beautiful. There were countless beautiful girls in Dewey's capital, but she was probably the only one who was beautiful and had such a heroic spirit. When she put on her red warrior outfit, smiled as she pulled out the long sword at her waist. She was either giving orders to the soldiers or instructing the soldiers and horses. The young people on the field were all stunned by her brilliance. Lin Shuanghe came to see Xiao Ju twice, and both times he felt the crisis for Xiao Ju. He only knew that when Xiao Ju was in the Liangzhou guards, she was a woman dressed as a man, and the brothers in the barracks didn't know her identity. Now she was dressed as a woman and mingled with these young men every day. These young men who were as passionate as fire almost didn't hide their love for her. Ian didn't feel it. In her eyes, these young men were no different from Wang Ba and the others in the past. They were all good men, good brothers. After the Battle of Udo, half of the brothers in the Liang province guards left. The remaining few had been tempered by the battlefield and were now very outstanding. Even the Liang province guards, they were outstanding. Jiang Jiao's dojo became famous because of Jiang Jiao. Dojo Master Jiang was proud of Jiang Jiao. Most of Wang Ba's money was sent back to the bandit stronghold. The bandit stronghold he used to live in was no longer a bandit, and the fish pond he dug was quite profitable. It was said that the bandit stronghold often adopted orphans that no one wanted. Wang Ba would occasionally visit the stronghold. His temper was much better now, and even children dared to get close to him. Xiaomai grew the fastest after Shi Tu left. In the past, with Shi Tu's protection, he was still a playful young man who only thought about delicious food. Now, he was much more mature. His archery skills improved by leaps and bounds, and he was now even more accurate than Shi Tu. He was also not as greedy as before. When he talked to Yan, he was much quieter and not as cheerful as before. Yan felt a sense of loss, but people had to grow up. Fate pushed people onto their own paths. Some people would never change, and some people would slowly grow up. Time was like the wind. It was impossible to stop them. She flipped over and dismounted from her horse. Just now, she had demonstrated that the arrow in her hand had hit the bullseye. It was beautiful and dazzling. The young man who picked up the arrow looked at her. His eyes were filled with admiration. He said half shyly and half excitedly, "General, you're amazing. You flatter me." He patted his shoulder and said with a smile, "You should practice more. It's the same for you." The young man looked at her, took 2 steps forward, and called out, "General." Yan turned around and asked, "What's the matter?" I'm not good at archery. Can you give me some pointers?" He didn't dare to look into Yan's eyes. She had never been stingy with her soldiers' requests for pointers, so she said, "Of course I can. Try using the bow first. I'll take a look." In the distance, Lin Shuanghe waved his fan and said gloatingly, "Brother, you can even tolerate this?" Xiao Ju looked into the distance without showing any expression. I saw that the men on the martial arts field were all scheming against Sister He. He wanted to see the world in chaos. You and I are both men. We understand men's thoughts the best. Look at that boy. On the surface, he looks like he's asking for pointers. But isn't he just taking the opportunity to get close to her? I didn't use this trick when I was in school. How can he still use this old trick? TSK, TSK, TSK. Hey, why did you leave? Ian stood behind the young soldier. Just as she was about to adjust his posture, a cold voice sounded behind her, "Wait." She turned around and saw that the young soldier was also shocked. He couldn't speak clearly. "Military Governor Xiao, why are you here?" Ian asked. "I'm not on duty today." Xiao Ju glanced at the pale young man. Her lips curled up, and she mocked, "I'll teach him." The young soldier's face turned even uglier. Ian didn't suspect anything and only said, "Then I'll leave it to you. I'll go over there and take a look." She left with peace of mind. The young soldier looked at Hian's back and couldn't say anything. However, the man in front of him raised his eyebrows. No matter how you looked at it, his eyes were filled with unfriendliness. He said, "Go ahead and practice." Lin Shuanghe laughed heartily at the side. He silently cried tears of sympathy for the young soldier. When the sun set and the day's training ended, Hian went to the room next to the martial arts field to change his clothes. He saw the young soldier from the afternoon again. However, at this time, it was clearly late autumn. His entire body was soaked, as if he had just been fished out of the water. His lips were pale. Ian walked over and asked curiously, "What happened to you?" The young soldier stepped back and avoided her like a snake. He lowered his head and said, "It's nothing. I just practiced for too long. Thank you, General, for your understanding." Ian looked at the young soldier's back as he left in a hurry. He thoughtfully entered the room. When he entered, Xiao Ju was already inside. She took off her light armor and asked Xiao Ju while holding her own clothes, "I saw that brother outside, just now. What did you do? Why is he so tired? How can it be called training if he's not tired?" Xiao Ju casually drank her tea. Ian buttoned up his collar and said, "Even so, don't be too strict. I saw that among this batch of new recruits, there are actually a few who are quite talented. You came late today, so you didn't see them. There are a few young men who are quite skilled and handsome." When they practiced their spear skills in the martial arts field this morning, they were very beautiful. She seemed to be reminiscing. Their figures are also very elegant. I think they're not bad. Xiao Ju's face was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. He slowly asked, "Very pretty?" "Yes." Ian put on his outer robe. "It's probably because their waists are thin. When they fly, they have long legs." His eyes were almost burning with anger. "Hian." Hian laughed and pointed at him. "Military Governor Xiao, why are you so overbearing? Every time someone praises someone in front of you, you get so angry. You can't be so petty." She laughed heartily. Xiao Ju understood that she did it on purpose. Even so, he was still unhappy. He pursed his lips and ignored her. Hian moved closer to him and knew that he was unhappy. She said, "It's just a joke. In my eyes, there's no difference between men and women. But Military Governor Xiao, even if you don't believe in my character, you have to believe in yourself. No matter how beautiful they are, they can't be compared to you. No matter how good their figures are, I only like your waist." At the end of her words, her tone was flirtatious. Xiao Ju looked up at her. Ian was becoming more and more playful. He probably thought that since they were an old married couple, there was no need to put on an act. However, every time she said something unintentional or flirtatious, it would always cause ripples in his heart. He snorted and raised his eyebrows. "Wait. Wait for what?" Xiao Ju didn't answer her. Ian understood at night. After a night of intense sex, Qing Mei asked someone to bring in hot water. She took a bath and rolled into Xiao Ju's arms. She whined, "Tell me, if I have a child in the future, will they look like you or me?" Without waiting for Xiao Ju to speak, she said to herself, "Forget it. They'll look like you. I've thought about it. No matter if it's a boy or a girl, as long as they look like you, they'll be beautiful." Xiao Ju didn't care much about appearance. Lin Shuang has said that people didn't care about what they had. Appearance, family background, intelligence, or martial arts were all things to him. They weren't important. If they had a child in the future, Xiao Ju thought that it would be fine as long as the child was happy. Tian had been married to him for a few years, but they didn't have a child yet. When she went to the Liang Province Guards, she trained with the new recruits every day. In order to not be discovered, she went to the Wulu River to take a cold bath in the cold weather. She also ran around to fight in Jiuquan. In the end, she hurt her body. Lin Shuanghe wrote a prescription for her, and she slowly nursed her body back to health. Xiao family's relatives, such as Chung Li Su's mother, always asked why He Yin wasn't pregnant yet. There were even people who didn't know what was good for them who went to buy Rongwei and hinted that since He Yin couldn't give birth, it would be better for Xiao Ju to take in a concubine first. After all, second young master, Xiao couldn't be childless. Xiao Ju, who happened to pass by, said coldly in front of the person who spoke, "Do you think that just any Tom, Dick, or Harry can give birth to a Xiao family child?" He hated this kind of scheming. Xiao Ju didn't have many fantasies about children. If he really liked children in the future, it would be because they were He Yan's child. It would have nothing to do with anything else. Who said that men had to have children? Xiao Jing married by Rongwei back then, but he didn't have a child for many years. So what? Xiao family's men only married and had children because they loved them. If it was for the sake of having children, they would reproduce instinctively. How different were they from beasts? If Ian didn't have children in the future, then he wouldn't have children. He would just focus on dealing with her for the rest of his life. Ian didn't know what he was thinking. She always had beautiful expectations for these things. Moreover, she always thought that if God was willing to give her and Xiao Ju 2 lives together, then he wouldn't be stingy with giving them the best ending. Yinsheng has been a bit distracted recently. He Yin began to worry about other things. He looks so depressed. Did he get bullied outside? I've been busy training the soldiers all day, so I didn't have time to take care of him these days. Do you know what happened to him? Xiao Ju was speechless for a moment. She reminded her, Song Taodao hasn't been to He residence for half a month. Song Taodao liked He Yinsheng. She almost told the entire Shuo capital that she liked him. This child's love was also direct. She was swift and decisive. When she liked him, she gave He Yinsheng things. She gave him clothes, food, housing, and transportation. She wasn't reserved at all. He Yin admired her, but she also sympathized with Song Taotao's parents. They had to worry so much. Moreover, He Yinsheng, that brat, was still so cold. But she turned to Xiao Ju and said in surprise, "You mean Yinsheng likes Taotao?" Xiao Ju smiled as a tacit admission. He Yin was shocked. Looking at He Yunxing's bad temper towards the little girl, she really couldn't tell that he liked her. He Yin really couldn't tell that He Yinsheng liked Song Taodao. After all, He Yinsheng was better at hiding things than Xiao Ju. It wasn't until a few days later that he came to He Yin and asked He Yin and He Sui to go to the Song family to propose marriage that He Yin realized that Xiao Ju was telling the truth. "Do you really like Song Taodao?" she asked. "If you don't really like her, then don't flirt with her." "Of course I like her." He Yunxing's voice lowered. He seemed to be a little embarrassed. He blushed and said impatiently, "Anyway, if I marry her, I will treat her well for the rest of my life." He Yin was relieved. Although He Sui didn't have an official position, He Yunxing had a sister and brother-in-law who were generals. Although He Yinsheng was young, he was already outstanding in his career. His future was immeasurable. Moreover, Song Taotao liked him, so the Song family was happy to see this marriage. Without much effort, the marriage was settled. He Yin originally thought that He Yunsheng had offended Song Taodao. If he suddenly proposed marriage, he might be chased out by Song Taodao. He didn't expect that He Yunsheng, who usually didn't talk much, was quite good at coaxing girls. Not long after, He Yin saw Song Taodao happily go to the He family to deliver food to He Yunsheng. After the marriage was settled, the ceremony went very quickly. Other than the He family and the Song family, the happiest person was actually Chung Li Su. He Yin sometimes thought that Chung Li Su didn't look like He Yunsheng was marrying a wife, but more like he was marrying a wife. He often came to the He family to help. He was probably the first person in the capital to have a fiancé like this. He Yin took the opportunity to ask him, "Why are you so happy that Taodao is getting married? Are you really not unhappy at all?" "Why would I be unhappy?" Chung Li Su smiled as if he had picked up silver. "That's true. Miss Song, now that she has been taken by Uncle He, I am free. Otherwise, I would have to worry every day that my family would pick this marriage back up again. This is called, it's better to die than to die." He was quite proud. Ian thought about it. He was afraid that Chung Li Su would regret it in the future and accidentally make his nephew and younger brother into enemies. He asked, You really don't like Tao Tao at all? I don't like her. Chung Li Su smiled and said, Auntie, I know you and Uncle think I am unreliable, but I can still distinguish between what I like and what I don't like. Song Tao Tao and I are not the same kind of people. The girl I like, of course, has to be like me, able to discover the good in me. When Song Tao Tao saw me, she felt that I was not making progress. Trash young master, tell me, can I be your husband? Even friends need to know the occasion. Ian saw that his words were clear and logical and thought that it was fine. Young people had their own thoughts. Since Chung Li Su really didn't have any feelings for Song Tao Tao, then things had come to this point. It could be considered a kind of perfect ending. She began to help He Yunsheng with the marriage again. On the day of He Yunsheng's wedding, He Yin was very sad. He Yunsheng was the one getting married. She looked like an old mother who was sending her daughter off to get married. Tears appeared in her eyes. He Sui's father was not as emotional as He Yin. He Xining stood by He Yan's side and looked at her expression. He whispered, Today is young master He's big day. Sister, why do you look so sad? He Yin said, I'm not sad. I'm overjoyed. Although she had family in her previous life, for many reasons, she couldn't get close to them. Even He Xining, who was next to her, only got close in this life after the fall of the He family. But He Yunsheng was different. From the moment she became Lady He and opened her eyes, He Sui and He Yunsheng had become her family. Although they were poor, they gave her warmth that she had never experienced before. Now, the young man in green who awkwardly ate the pastries she gave him at the back of the mountain had finally grown into a mature man. He had his own beloved girl and became an adult. When people face things that are too perfect, they often feel unreal. Sometimes, He Yin suspected that everything in front of her was just a long dream. She was afraid that when she woke up, everything would be empty. He Yunsheng held the bride's hand and walked into the He family's courtyard. Immediately, there were cheers all around. The He family's courtyard was crowded. She had many friends, and He Yunsheng's wedding, everyone was willing to come and join in the fun. Needless to say, Wang Ba and the others, the instructors of the Liangzhou guards, also came. By Rongwei, Xiao Jing, Xiao Ju stood on the other side of her. Like He Yunsheng's older brother, they watched the newlyweds walk into the wedding hall. Lin Shuanghe said exaggeratedly, Even Yunsheng is getting married. I'm still alone. Chung Li Su patted him on the shoulder. It's okay, Uncle Lin. I'm also alone. Let's go together. Lin Shuanghe, the newlyweds were getting married, and the wedding banquet was lively. He also drank a lot. In fact, other than during festivals, she was very restrained from drinking. After all, who knew if she would go and recite in front of others when she was drunk? It was fine if Xiao Ju saw it, but if it was spread to other people, including the Fuyue army, who knew what kind of eyes they would use to look at her as a general in the future, they would probably think that she loved to show off. Once she was drunk, she would reveal her true colors and insist on showing off her talents. However, He Yunsheng's wedding was a big day, so she still had a drink. When Xiao Ju came over, He Yin was already drunk. She was sitting at the table. When she saw him, she waved at Xiao Ju and shouted, Military Governor Xiao. Xiao Ju helped her up and said to He Sui, Yin Yin is drunk. I'll send her back first. Go. He Sui also said it's getting late. You should go back. Come back tomorrow morning when you're free to drink Tao Tao's tea. Xiao Ju nodded and helped He Yin out of the hall. She reminded her, there are stairs. Be careful. He Yin turned her head and hugged his waist. She refused to leave. Xiao Ju took a deep breath and looked at the person in front of her. Lady He, let's go home. Military Governor Xiao. She looked up at him. From her appearance, it was hard to tell that she was drunk. She said, Let me tell you a secret. Tell me. Behind him, in the wedding hall, the joyous laughter of the musical instruments gradually faded away. The night wind was cold and cheerless. He pulled Yan's outer garment a little tighter. He saw Yan point at the moon on the roof and say, I like the moon. He was suddenly stunned. At some point in his memory, she had said the same thing to him. At that time, he had not completely fallen in love with He Yin, but his heart was inevitably moved. She whispered in his ear, and he took it as a casual joke. He did not know how much sincerity was hidden in that joke. If she was destined to hide in the dark, where the moon could not shine, she would just stand far away and hide the secret in her heart. The woman in front of him gave him a big smile. Her eyes were as bright as the stars. She reached out and hugged his neck. She whispered in his ear, "I'll tell you another secret." She stood on tiptoe and gently kissed him on the lips. "The moon is yours." In an instant, the moon was as beautiful as a painting. The world's fireworks and all kinds of emotions could not compare to this moment of eternity. The moon was lonely and cold. The moon hung in the sky, until one day, he saw a traveler stumbling along the endless dark road. He casually sprinkled a ray of light to illuminate the road in front of the traveler. At that moment, he saw a beautiful world with a warm sun and rosy clouds. Hien seemed to be extremely tired. Leaning in his arms, she closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. He stared blankly for a moment, then lowered his head and planted a sincere kiss on her forehead. Carrying her horizontally, he walked out of the room. The autumn night was long. The grass in the courtyard was luxuriant. Moths flew to the candles. The wind sighed. The man walked out step by step. The corners of his lips were curved. It was full of youthful joy. She did not know that the moon also had its own secret. She was the moon's worry. She was the moon's lover. She was the beginning of his heart, and also the end of his love. This was the moon's secret. Chapter 271. The first time Xia Chengxiu met Yin, he was at the spring banquet with his cousin. Although it was called a spring banquet, it was actually just an opportunity for the noble young masters and young ladies of the right age to see each other. At that time, Xia Chengxiu was only 16 years old. Although there were young ladies of this age in the capital who were already married, Xia Chengxiu doted on his daughter and did not intend to marry Xia Chengxiu off so early. Therefore, Xia Chengxiu only came out to have fun with his cousin. It was the spring of April, and the grass was long and the orioles were flying. The tender grass by the Sisui River was furry. Xia Chengxiu followed his cousin Xia Qianqian out of the carriage. There were already young ladies he knew who were flying kites. Seeing this, Xia Qianqian immediately asked the maidservant to take out the prepared kites and walk towards her friend. Xia Qianqian was 18 years old this year. Among the group of young ladies, her appearance was especially outstanding. She was exceptionally sweet and beautiful. She also understood the strength of her appearance very well. She wore a scarlet tulle embroidered narrow collar dress that outlined her slim figure. In the crowd, she could be seen at a glance. Her family background was also the most superior among this group of young ladies. In just a moment, she was surrounded by people and praised. At that time, Xia Chengxiu was still a 16-year-old girl. At most, she could only be considered delicate and pretty, not to mention compared to her cousin Xia Qianqian. Xia Chengxiu was usually called a bookworm, and Xia Chengxiu was secretly called a little bookworm. She scrupulously followed etiquette. Among her peers or sisters, she seemed a little dull and taciturn, which was not likable enough. The relationship between Xia Qianqian and Xia Chengxiu could not be considered close. They were just ordinary cousins. However, with Xia Chengxiu, this dull and boring bookworm, by her side, it made Xia Qianqian look delicate, light, and intelligent. Xia Chengxiu did not think much of it. Seeing that his cousin and her friend were talking animatedly, he picked up a book and sat at the side to read. Xia Qianqian couldn't be bothered with her. After a while, everyone began to set up a long table beside the Sisui shoreline. On the long table were the snacks that the young ladies had brought out from the residence. They could eat here at noon. After an unknown period of time, Xia Chengxiu heard the young ladies beside him talking about which brand's new rouge color was beautiful. Now, they were talking about young Master Yin will also come today. The young master of the Yin family referred to the current young master of the left and right vanguard's commander's residence, Yin Nanguan. He was only 18 years old this year. It was said that he was brave and good at fighting, and was born with a talent of striking appearance. At such a young age, his future was limitless. Xia Qianqian's father intended to marry into the Yin family. Today's outing was also a tacit understanding with the old master and madam of the Yin family. It was to see if there was any fate between the two juniors. Xia Qingxiu had also heard about this, but this was her cousin's business. She came out today to serve as a foil to her cousin, basking in the sun and reading a book. Just as she was thinking, someone beside her suddenly shouted softly, "They're here!" Xia Qingxiu looked up and saw a group of youths approaching from afar on the bank of the Sisui shoreline. The leading youth was wearing a silver robe. This color was really too eye-catching, but he was handsome and tall, so he didn't find it strange. His hair was tied into a high ponytail, and his eyebrows were unruly. He seemed to be a little irritated and impatient, but it made him stand out among the group of youths. Everyone said that there were 3 beauties in the Shuo capital. Young Master Xiao was like the spring breeze, second young Master Xiao was like the autumn water, and fourth young Master Chu was like an orchid. This youth was like a silver spear. It was a little exaggerated, overly gorgeous, but with a straightforward impulse. The handsome youth who walked out of the spring day was always exceptionally beautiful. Even though Xia Qingxiu wasn't very interested in these things, he couldn't help but take a few more glances at him. He thought to himself that with this person's appearance, he should be considered the 4th most beautiful person. Just as he was thinking, the young lady sitting beside Xia Qianqian pushed Xia Qianqian and said in a low voice, "Qianqian, this is young Master Yin. He looks really compatible with you." Xia Qianqian blushed inexplicably. Before she came, although she had heard of Yin He's name, she had never seen him in person. She didn't know what he looked like. Today, when she saw him, she realized that he was so handsome. For a moment, she was a little moved. The group of youths didn't approach. From afar, a few youths were laughing and laughing. They began to take out the prepared kites and began to play with the east wind. In the sky of Sisui disease, there were many kites, sand swallows, magpies, 2 dragons playing with a pearl. The silver-robed youth was surrounded and pushed by people. Finally, he impatiently followed the order to bring a black King Kong and held it in his hand. The black King Kong flew very quickly. This youth was very good at releasing kites. The young ladies watched from afar and couldn't help but secretly cheer. However, they couldn't tell whether it was the kite that flew the highest or the youth who released the kite that was cheering for him. Xia Qianqian looked at it and suddenly stood up. She smiled and said, "Let's go release it too." In fact, before this, the young ladies had already released kites for a while. However, these young ladies from rich families were physically weak. After releasing them for a while, they had to sit down and rest. The rest was left to the servants. Xia Qianqian stood up and walked to the maid who was placing her 100 butterfly painting. She said, "Let me do it." The young ladies sitting at the long table immediately laughed. Someone whispered, "Looks like Qianqian likes it." Xia Qingxiu was a little puzzled when she heard that, but she didn't say anything. She wasn't a talkative person to begin with. She only saw Xia Qianqian pulling the kite's string and walking toward the river. Then she saw that the 2 kites in the sky were getting closer and closer. She hesitated whether she should open her mouth to remind her. In the next moment, she heard her cousin exclaim, "Aya!" The string of the 100 butterfly painting and the black King Kong were entangled together. They collided into a ball and fell towards the forest. The noble ladies beside her laughed even louder. They discussed in low voices, "Qianqian, good method." Xia Qianqian was still holding the kite string in her hand. Her expression was flustered, but there was a smug joy in her eyes. She was very confident in her appearance. If she wanted to capture the heart of a youth, it shouldn't be a difficult task. Her rouge today was very beautiful, and her dress was also very beautiful. She turned around and glanced at the silver-robed youth who was frowning as he stared at the entangled kite. She turned around and ran into the forest where the kite fell. At the same time, Xia Qingxiu, who was sitting at the side, put down the book in her hand and stood up. The noble lady beside her asked, "Miss Qingxiu, what are you doing?" "Sister's kite fell. I'm going to help," Xia Qingxiu replied. "Why are you helping?" The noble lady who spoke covered her mouth and laughed. She looked at her as if she was looking at a fool, and there was a complicated sourness in her eyes. "Qianqian doesn't need your help now." Xia Qingxiu pursed her lips. In the end, she was worried about Xia Qianqian being alone, so she lifted her skirt and ran over. The noble ladies called her a few times, but when they saw that she ignored them, they let it go. The forest where the kite fell was not far from the river, but there were bushes growing inside. When a girl walked inside, she had to be careful of the thorny branches and leaves cutting the corner of her skirt. Xia Qingxiu struggled to push aside the bushes and saw a corner of his cousin's scarlet dress not far away. His heart relaxed, and he was about to walk over when he suddenly heard Xia Qianqian say, "Young Master Yin." Xia Qingxiu paused. Only then did he see someone standing in front of Xia Qianqian. It was the main character of today's meeting, young Master Yin. Xia Qianqian's voice was gentle and sweet, with a hint of panic and apology. "Young Master Yin, I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose." And he just frowned at her. His gaze was bright and sharp, making Xia Qianqian feel a little guilty for no reason. Xia Qianqian grabbed the corner of her clothes uneasily. "Young Master Yin, the kites are all entangled together now. What should we do?" Xia Qianqian's eyes were shy and her voice was sweet. Xia Qingxiu finally understood that his cousin was probably seducing this young Master Yin. However, it was too late for her to leave now. She was afraid of alarming the two people in front of her, so she was forced to watch the next scene. At the same time, she thought that this young Master Yin would probably say things like, "It's okay," and "It's none of your business." Then, he would comfort her softly and send Xia Qianqian home. After that, this marriage would be settled. That should be it, right? "It's okay." Just as he thought of this, the youth's voice came from the front. Xia Chengxiu thought in his heart that it was indeed so. Raising his head, he saw Yin He suddenly smile without a care in the world. He casually pulled out a small knife from his waist and cleanly cut off the threads between the two kites. Xia Qingxiu was dumbfounded. She was not the only one who was shocked. Xia Qianqian was stunned for a moment before asking, "What are you doing?" "So we're separated." Yin He put away the knife. "Don't worry, I'm a broad-minded person. I won't hold it against you for deliberately breaking my kite." Xia Qianqian had always been flattered by others since she was young. No one had ever spoken to her like this. For a moment, a sense of shame surged into her heart. She cried out, "Who deliberately broke your kite?" She slapped Yin He, lifted her skirt, and ran away crying. Xia Qingxiu was so scared that she did not dare to breathe loudly. She thought to herself that this young master, Yin, was really unexpected. "Hey," someone said in an annoyed voice. "The one who's peeping over there. Have you seen enough?" Xia Qingxiu was stunned. Had she been discovered? The next moment, that person had already walked in front of her. Xia Qingxiu subconsciously took a step back. Looking closer, this young man, called Yin, he was indeed very handsome, but when he looked at people, he always had a condescending look. When Yin He saw Xia Qingxiu, he was also stunned. He frowned and said, "It's you." Among the noble ladies at the long table, he had seen Xia Qingxiu a long time ago. She did not chat and laugh with those noble ladies, nor did she fly kites. She just sat beside Xia Qianqian and read, like a decoration. "That person just now," he asked, "who is she to you?" Xia Qingxiu said, "Cousin." Yin He snorted and said in disgust, "Pretentious." He pushed Xia Qingxiu away and walked forward. Xia Qingxiu did not expect Yin He to suddenly push her. She was a young lady who could not lift or carry anything. Yin He was a martial arts practitioner. After being pushed like this, he took a few steps back. His hand accidentally brushed against a thorny branch, and in an instant, a red mark appeared on the back of his hand. Such a red mark on his fair skin looked very dazzling. Yin He was also stunned. He did not expect these delicate young ladies to be so fragile. They could get hurt just by touching them. He was a little annoyed, but he could not sit back and do nothing. He took a step forward to check on her injury, but he did not expect Xia Qingxiu to immediately take a step back. "You're injured," Yin He said. "I know." Xia Qingxiu's expression was calm, as if she did not care about the wound on the back of her hand. Her tone was calm, but men and women should not touch each other. And he was a little puzzled. The girl in front of him was far less beautiful than Xia Qianqian. The dress she was wearing was light yellow, and she did not wear any makeup. She looked like she was still at the age where she did not know about love. How could it be not touching each other? He said, "This little girl is young, but she's quite old-fashioned." Xia Qingxiu just turned sideways to avoid him. "I'm broad-minded. I won't argue with young master Yin about the fact that you deliberately pushed me." Yin was stunned. After Xia Qingxiu said this, he turned around and left. Yin touched his chin. This guy was avenging her cousin. This was the first time he was scolded by a woman like this. She looked gentle and refined, and it seemed that she was not a person who would suffer losses. After Xia Qingxiu left the forest, the noble ladies at the long banquet had already dispersed in twos and threes. Xia Qianqian was probably unhappy with Yan He, so she cried and took the carriage to go back. Xia Qingxiu also had to hurriedly follow. As a result, when Yan He came out, the group of noble ladies had already boarded the carriage. There was a book lying in the grass beside the long banquet. Yan He remembered that when he came, only Xia Qingxiu was sitting here reading a book. This book was probably hers, but she left in a hurry and forgot about it. He bent down and picked it up. He opened it and saw that it was a travel book. There was also someone's note on it. The handwriting was extremely beautiful and elegant. It reminded him of the girl who quietly scolded him in the forest just now. And he pursed his lips and said in a low voice, "Bookworm." However, for some reason, he put the travel book into his arms. This meeting with Xia Qianqian naturally ended without any results. Xia Qianqian's parents even treated Commander Yin coldly for a period of time. Commander Yin turned around and scolded Yan He, but Yan He himself did not think much of it. However, this marriage did not continue. Time passed quickly, and another year passed. Xia Qingxiu was 17 years old. Lord Xia was thinking that he should start looking for suitable young talents in Shuo capital for Xia Qingxiu. When He returned to the residence, he heard his mother discussing with his aunt about matchmaking his cousin to Xia Qingxiu. Xia Qingxiu. He stopped walking into the house and turned his head to ask, "Is it the young lady of the Imperial College's Chancellor's residence?" "How do you know?" Mother Yin asked in confusion. "Don't you hate to remember the names of these young ladies?" And he did not answer his mother's question. He only frowned and asked, "Cousin is 2 years older than me. Miss Xia is still young, right? In terms of age, am I not more suitable?" Commander Yin scolded him. "Miss Xia is from a scholarly family and is knowledgeable. Didn't you say that you hate people who play with words the most? Don't you hate bookworms the most? Are you willing to matchmake you?" And he did not say anything. He returned to his room and stared at the pond outside the window for half a day. He took out a book from the bottom of the desk drawer. It was a travel book. In the middle of the night, when the dogs in the Yin residence were asleep, He put on his outer clothes and knocked on the door of his parents' bedroom. "Yin Nongguang, you scared people to death in the middle of the night. What do you want?" Commander Yin was furious. He said, "I'm willing." After that, it was a long day of chasing, and he tried his best to please the beauty. Master Xia was very fierce and old-fashioned. Every time He saw him, he was a little scared. Xia Qingxiu was even scarier than Master Xia. He was clearly a bookworm who did not have the strength to trust a chicken. However, every time he looked at him with his calm eyes, he did not know what to do. Commander Yin scolded him at home. "You're usually like a gamecock. Why don't you know how to chase a girl properly? Why doesn't she like you? Can't you think about it?" And he could not think of it. He felt that he was quite good. He was handsome, agile, and had a good family background. He was one of the top young talents in Shuo capital. Why didn't Xia Qingxiu like him? It must be because that bookworm did not know how to appreciate men. He was blind. However, he did not dare to say this in front of Xia Qingxiu. Seeing that her son had a lot on his mind, Madame Yin felt gratified and helpless. She could only beat around the bush. "Since you like her, you should treat her better. Take care of her more. Eventually, Miss Xia will see the good in you." And he felt that his mother's words made sense. However, he did not know how to treat someone well. The jewelry and clothes he gave were all returned. The love poem he wrote was returned to his servant the next day. Sometimes he felt annoyed. When he first met Xia Qingxiu, he should not have been so rude and frivolous. It would have been better than trying his best to remedy the situation, but he still felt that the results were not good. As a proud son of heaven, He finally felt the anxiety of love and could not sleep. And no matter how he treated Xia Chengxiu, this girl had treated him neither coldly nor warmly from beginning to end. Therefore, when he asked Commander Yin to propose marriage to Xia Chengxiu, Yin went with a feeling of failure. However, he was about to lead the army into battle. Life and death were unpredictable on the battlefield. If he did not propose marriage, he was afraid that he would not have another chance. It was better to be disappointed after trying than to be disappointed before trying. That was what he thought. However, he did not expect that Lord Xia would agree to the marriage proposal from Yin family. He could not believe it. This was supposed to be a happy event. However, when it came to the end, Yin shrank back. If he died, wouldn't Xia Chengxiu bear the infamy of being a jinx to her husband? He walked out of Xia Chengxiu's house with a heavy heart. When he was about to leave, someone called him from behind. Young Master Yin. He turned around and saw Xia Chengxiu standing behind him, looking at him quietly. And he was at a loss for words. Young Master Yin. This quiet girl smiled at him for the first time. She was gentle and sweet, like the spring willows by the Sisui River, full of warmth. Come back early, she said. He stared blankly for a moment, then inexplicably blushed. Under the sunlight, he stared straight at this girl. He stared until the servant girl beside Xia Chengxiu took out a broom and prepared to chase him away. Only then did he cough lightly and say in a small voice, I will. After taking 2 steps, he turned around and added nonchalantly, Wait for me. Chapter 272. Every time Yin went to war, Xia Chengxiu would be waiting for him in the mansion. From 1 person to 2 people waiting, what they got in the end was bad news. In the first year after Yin left, everyone thought that Xia Chengxiu would wash her face with tears and be sad all day long. However, what she showed was a shocking calmness. Mu Xiao was well taken care of by her. Lin Shuanghe often came to visit. Xia Chengxiu would still smile and do what she was doing in an orderly manner. Sometimes, when she woke up in the middle of the night, she would subconsciously try to touch the person beside her. It was only when her hand touched the cold mattress that she seemed to realize that the person who had warmed her was no longer there. Eventually, she would slowly fall silent. In the 5th year after Yin left, Commander Yin and Madame Yin took the initiative to persuade Xia Chengxiu to remarry. Xia Chengxiu was not old. It was not like there were no widows who remarried in the capital. She was gentle, and she was also the daughter of Lord Xia. She might have a good family. However, Xia Chengxiu politely declined. Xia Chengxiu said, I have Mu Xia. That is enough. A new singing jade hall was opened in the capital. Xia Chengxiu often went to help. She arranged her life to the fullest and calmly continued her life without Yin. Yin often came to talk to her. Xia Chengxiu knew that she was worried about him. However, ever since she was young, she had a personality that did not make people worry. Just like the first time Yin saw her, she would never let herself be taken advantage of. 10 years after Yin left, Mu Xia already had the appearance of a young man. His facial features were similar to Yin-he's, but he was more delicate than Yin-he. His spear skills were already very good. Yin and Xiao Ju would come to teach him swordsmanship when they were free. He often provoked Xiao Ju. With a high ponytail and a silver spear in his hand, he said, Military Governor Xiao, in a few years, you will be defeated by me. Of course, he ended up being thrown onto a tree by Xiao Ju. However, even though he couldn't beat Xiao Ju, he was able to use the competition as an excuse to get back at Xiao Yao. As the saying goes, a father's debt must be paid by a daughter. In the 15th year after Yin left, Mu Xia found a girl he liked. The young man was staring blankly at the thing in his hand. When he saw his mother come in, he hurriedly hid the sachet that his sweetheart had given him. Xia Chengxiu smiled and sat down beside him. You like this girl very much? She asked. Mu Xia subconsciously retorted, Who likes her? His ears quietly turned red. Xia Chengxiu patted his head and said, Then remember to treat her better. The young man pretended to be calm and looked away. With a red face, he said without much confidence, In the 20th year after Yin he left, Yin Musha married the daughter of the Minister of Revenue. It was the girl that he liked when he was 15. They gave birth to a daughter named Niao Niao. Yin Musha treated Niao Niao and her mother very well. In the past, there was a rumor in the capital that Gai Zhonglong, Yin Nongguang, was a henpecked husband. Now that she saw how Yin Musha treated his wife and daughter, she realized that he had inherited his father's business. Niao Niao looked like her mother and was closest to her grandmother, Xia Qingxiu. Her personality was not as arrogant as Yin Mushia's, nor was she as lively as her mother's. Everyone said that she was very similar to Xia Qingxiu in the past. She was gentle, quiet, soft, and strong. In the 25th year after Yin he left, Niao Niao, who was 5 years old, was playing the fu when she found a cloth bag under her grandfather's old bed. Yin's study room had not been touched in all these years. It maintained its original appearance. Xia Qingxiu personally cleaned it every day for more than 20 years. Niao Niao slipped in when she was not paying attention. Niao Niao was small, so she went to the innermost part of the study room and found a treasure wrapped in a red cloth. Niao Niao thought about it and handed the cloth bag to Xia Qingxiu as if it was a treasure. After so many years, Xia Qingxiu's hand that was holding the red cloth trembled when she saw what yin he had left behind. She opened the cloth bag. Sunlight came in through the window and made her squint her eyes. After so many years, she was old and her eyes were not as clear as before. She looked at it for a while before she could see clearly that it was a book with the words "Happy Travels" written on it. The book had been stored for a long time. The pages were all yellowed. Because it was kept in the dark all day long, there was a sense of decay. Niao Niao had already been attracted by the larks outside the courtyard and ran out. Xia Qingxiu's gaze fell on the page for a long time. She finally remembered a certain spring day when she followed her cousin to the Sisui shoreline to enjoy the flowers, and the book was left behind. At that time, she was only 16 years old, the best years of her life. It was at that time, in the spring, the kites by the Sisui shoreline were entangled. The young man cut off the love of the girl opposite him with a knife. He was decisive like an emotionless villain. He turned around and picked up the book she had left behind and treasured it for so many years. She slowly flipped open the book and was stunned. Unknowingly, a line of small words had been secretly written on the title page of the book. The flowers are deep, the willows are dark. Passing through the willows and flowers, I search for the message. The husband betrays the wife. The handwriting was firm and frivolous. It was obvious that it was written by a man. She was not unfamiliar with it. It was Yin He's handwriting. Time passed quickly. In an instant, she seemed to be able to travel through many years. She saw the frivolous young man in a silver robe with a ponytail sitting in front of the table. He was biting the pen in agitation. He was almost gnashing his teeth as he wrote such a poem full of grievances and complaints on the title page. It was like a resentful woman scolding a heartless man whose heart was as hard as iron. Who would have thought that Yin He would do such a thing? Xia Qingxiu was stunned for a moment. Then she laughed. The sunlight gently fell on her hair, blurring her white hair. Her smile was like a flower. She was like a 16-year-old girl who was moved for the first time. It was sweet and happy. That night, she saw Yin He. He was wearing a new silver robe like many years ago. He stood in front of her with an arrogant attitude. She was wearing a light yellow dress. Niao Niao stood in front of him and asked calmly, "Why did you take my book?" The young man's arrogant expression quickly changed. He panicked. However, he tried his best to maintain his composure. He coughed lightly and said, "I picked it up. It's mine. You even scribbled on it." She gently pointed out his bad behavior. Yin's face turned even redder. He defended himself. "That's not scribbling. If it's not scribbling, then what is it?" He fidgeted with his ponytail. His tone was a little fierce. However, there was a hint of grievance at the end of his words. "It's what you think it means." Xia Qingxiu stared at him without saying a word. He was like a paper tiger. He asked, "Why are you looking at me?" Xia Qingxiu couldn't help but laugh. Yin He looked at her, not knowing what to do. After a while, he seemed to be touched by Xia Qingxiu's laughter and laughed as well. He hesitantly reached out his hand, wanting to hold Xia Chengxiu's hand. Pa! The wind blew the window loudly. Xia Chengxiu opened her eyes. Yanni wasn't there. The mattress beside her was empty. She looked at the canopy silently for a while. Then, she slowly sat up and got off the bed barefoot. It was late at night. The floor was cold. It was the 25th spring day after Yanni left. She woke up from her dream. She was so sad that she couldn't sleep. She slowly sat on the floor and buried her head in her knees. It was the first time in so many years that she cried silently. Time passed slowly. A day was also long. However, it passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, a lifetime had passed. On the 30th year after Yanni left, Xia Chengxiu passed away due to illness. Her children and grandchildren stayed by her side. This woman was quiet and gentle all her life. She was always calm and gentle. Before she died, she only handed a book to Yin Muxia and asked him to bury her with Yin He. When the coffin was buried, it was a sunny day. The kites by the Sisui River were all over the sky, and the peonies were in full bloom. It was like a day many years ago when he walked over from the long embankment full of new willows and bent down to pick up the travel notes. But inadvertently, he left behind the joyful thoughts of a young man. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.